Go ahead and turn to Isaiah chapter 35, and we will spend the entirety tonight in that particular chapter. There's two things I want us to do tonight. Number one, I want us to explain before we get there what tonight's lesson is all about. And here it is with one simple statement. God has taken care of you and me. God has taken care of you and me. And then number two, what I want to do is I want to prove that to us. I want to make the statement, and I want to prove it. You know, I don't think we really pay this much attention in our lives of how good we really have it in the day and age we live. We're not living, as you look in the Old Testament, in the days of Pharaoh, where he ruled over the world and where God's people were in captivity in the physical sense. We're not living under some of those like the Assyrian kings who ruled to conquer the world and would do anything that they could to have the biggest territory that this world has ever seen. Yet we're living in simple times, aren't we? Though things sometimes are very complex, we're living in what I would call simple times. God has taken care of you and me. We're not living under the Old Testament law, which was very hard. You might even say was very rigid. But we're living under the law of Christ, where in reality, Christ has done all for you and me, hasn't he? Did you go to the cross or did he? Did you die or did he? Did you save mankind or did he? Now, yes, I understand that we must, Luke 9:23-25, take up our own cross daily. Yes, I understand that we've got to die to self. But in comparison to what Jesus Christ has done, what have we? Very little, isn't it? You see, in Isaiah, there's this great comparison happening between Israel and God. Now, Israel has been living away from God. They've been walking away from God, and that's what happens in Isaiah chapter 34. Isaiah chapter 34 is about God's punishment to God's people. They were going into captivity. It was coming. It was a fact. They weren't getting around it. But chapter 35 is a much different chapter because it's about God's provisions. Number one, let's look at the life that's present. And number two, let's look at the life in what's called the perfect. Now, the life that's present happens in verses 3 and 4. Read with me. Strengthen ye the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. Say to them that are fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. Even God with a recompense, he will come and save you. They were living in uncertain times. Captivity was coming. War was coming. Problems were coming. That was the life that was at hand. This word weak here in verse 3, strengthen ye the weak hands, it is a word that means feeble. It's a word that means frail. But in 4 different occasions inside of the Old Testament, this word here, strengthen ye the weak hands, in 4 different occasions, this word is used and translated as alone. And you start to get the essence of this word. Here were a people who were feeble. Here were a people who were weak. But here were a people who, when they go into captivity, were going to feel alone because they had walked away from God. Strengthen the weak hands, confirm the feeble knees. Verse 4, say to them that are fearful at heart. This word fearful is a very interesting word. It's a word that means anxious. We would say this way, nervous. Have you ever had to make a decision and you weren't really sure what you were supposed to decide, but you had to decide now and you were going between one and the other, one and the other, one and the other, one and the other? You were nervous about your decision because you did not know what to decide. That's this word right here. Those that are fearful at heart, those that do not know what to do. That is life in the present for Israel. They had weak hands. They were afraid. They were feeble. They were frail. They had fearful hearts. They were anxious. They were nervous. And they did not know what to do. But yet in Isaiah 35, there is life in what's called the perfect. This is verses 1 and 2 and verses 5 through 10. What I want you to do with me tonight is look at verses 8 through 10. Now, verses 1 and 2 describe how the desert places, they're going to blossom, they're going to survive. It's not going to be gloom and doom in the perfect. The blind will see, verse 5. The lame and mute, they will be fine, verse 6. But there is this highway in verses 8 through 10 that I want you to see. And a highway shall be there, and a way. And it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it. I love the essence here happening in Isaiah 35. There is coming a way in which people will be able to come unto God. Now, what's happening in Isaiah 35 is not talking about their escape out of captivity, but yet it's talking about something that's coming in the future, and that was Jesus Christ. That is the church. There is a way to escape all the problems of this world, and it's through Jesus Christ. And it's called here in verse 8 a highway, and I love this idea. It is the way or the highway of holiness. The unclean shall not be there. We know there's a distinct difference between clean and unclean. It very much goes along with many of the New Testament passages, the broad and the narrow way. That there is going to be a people who will be on the way to heaven, and there's a certain way they're going to be, and the unclean will not be there. The sinful will not be there. I love verse 9. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go up thereon. On the way to heaven, what's going to stop you on that way? There's not anything to get in your way. Nothing like a lion will be there. Nothing like a ravenous beast will be there. I love verse 9. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. There's a great concept happening here in verse 9. And here it is. And this goes along with this morning's lesson. If you want to go to heaven, go to heaven. But if you don't, you won't. I love the scenes here in Isaiah 30. Nothing's going to get in the way, and nothing's going to stop the people on this highway of holiness. And then verse 10, this shows us how it's going to be in this time that's coming, talked about in Isaiah 35. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come up to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads, and they shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and singing shall flee away. Do you know what this particular time is talking about? Verses 1 and 2 and verses 5 through 10. It's talking about the coming of the church. There's coming a day where there's going to be a way in which man can come unto God. And I love this. Nothing's going to stop them, verse 9. And verse 10, of them and in their lives, it's going to be joy. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Shouldn't that describe the New Testament church? Should that not describe the way we think about the Lord's church? Sighing and sorrow, it flies away. And the big question becomes for you and me in Isaiah 35 is, what does that have to do with you and me in the day that we live? Now, I know in Isaiah 34 they were looking for that punishment that was coming, and they needed some hope, Isaiah 35. But that was so far removed from them in their lives. So what does that have to do with you and me? Well, for you and me, the church has already been established. Jesus Christ has already come, and that tells me this highway, this way to holiness, this way to heaven has already been built. Are we going to go that way? Is the big question from Isaiah 35 for you and me. Do we have the hope of that way? Do we recognize that verse 8, nothing is going to stop us on that way, verse 8 and 9? And do we recognize verse 10, that as when we're on that way, we're going to be filled with joy? Don't you want to be filled with joy? May I suggest to you and to me, the only way we can have true joy is to be on the highway of holiness. What we've recognized is their present condition, and it was full of sorrow. They had weak hands. They had feeble knees because they knew what they were going to face. God had told them, you're going to captivity, but God told them there's the perfect time which is to come, and here's what's good for you and me. We live in that perfect time. No, we don't live under the Assyrian rule. No, we're not living in Israel under the Old Testament law, but we're living under the law of Christ where He has taken our burdens away, where we can walk on that way of holiness and we can be with Him. Maybe for you tonight, you need to begin to walk on that way of holiness. I know tonight's an abbreviated service, and I know many of us are going to go to Fairview to their gospel meeting tonight, but maybe, just maybe, one of us needs to become a child of God tonight. If that's you, we're going to sing a song. Let's respond. Let's make that happen tonight. Maybe there's something in your life, and maybe you recognize it now, and maybe you're saying to yourself, I'm not on that way. I'm not going that way. Things have stopped me. Well, make it right with the Lord. Come back to Him. Bryce has picked out a good invitation song. Let's sing that song and respond if necessary. Let's stand and sing.